there's a chance, I'll take it. And if I can't, ooh, I'll stay here. I ain't got nothing.
All right, scholars, we are ready to begin this debate showcase. Before we do that, I ask you once again, these scholars who are up here, these 8 scholars, this is most likely the largest crowd they have ever spoken in front of. They didn't know they were going to be coming up here until just a few minutes ago. So we need you to help them feel comfortable, show them love when they come up to the stage, give them a round of applause. When they finish their speech, give them a round of applause. Help them feel as relaxed and comfortable as you can from where you're sitting. And without further ado, we are ready for speaker number 1 from the affirmative team. All right, please introduce yourself. Tell us your name, your school, your country, and begin.
So I'm Henry Spencer from the Mulgrave School in Canada. Worthy opponents, honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, today the resolution is that children should grow up without myths, and we on Side Proposition are so proud to propose this model. So first, before I get into my constructive speech, I'd like to lay off the definitions for today's debate and hopefully clarify some of the terms. So the model that we're presenting you today with is a myth is a story said to be true, but there are supported, accepted evidence, and there's a lot of this evidence to disprove it. Okay, so now our model looks like a government would ban this teaching of myths in schools, but it would also discourage parents from telling their kids about these myths in the home. And remember, this doesn't include fiction, because fiction is told to be true. This only includes things that we say are true, but are clearly false because there's evidence to back this up. Okay, so today I will be talking about how fiction is not mythological, and thus we can't count certain stories as myths, but we can also turn myths into fiction to preserve them under our model. The second speaker will be talking about how myths impact a children's development and are ultimately bad for it. And our third speaker will be talking about societal effects of myths and how not only through the development of children, but also there's wider implications of myths on society that ultimately have negative impacts, even though we try to gloss over them with even more myths. And finally, our fourth speaker will do a rebuttal and rebuild our case and finally prove to you why we're so proud to propose. Okay, so now on to my constructive speech. So why is fiction not mythological? So myths are told to be true, but fiction is false, hence the name. So what can constitute fiction? So oftentimes we see this in the form of like books and novels, but we could also look at a modern view of myths that were at least once believed to be myths in an ancient time, but now are false. Take, for example, the story of Sisyphus. Now, this is pretty much regarded as false, and few would actually believe in this as a myth. So we could count this as fiction and say, well, this is the fictional story of Sisyphus. Thus, we're not saying that it's a true story, so it doesn't really count as a myth anymore because we're specifically saying that it is fiction. Another example of fiction would just be like anything that you've probably read in a fiction aisle of the bookstore. Like take, for example, The Hunger Games. We don't think this is true. Thus, these stories wouldn't have to be banned under our model. Okay, so now what constitutes myths, the opposite side of this debate? So a good example of a myth would be creationism. So we have scientific evidence proving the Big Bang, proving that we weren't created in 7 days, yet there's tons of people who still hold on to this belief. So this kind of myth would not be allowed to be taught in schools under our form that it was true. Sure, we could still teach this that it's a myth, it's false. But if we say that this is the true story of how the world was created, and then outline how it was created in a 7-day period, not like ignoring all the scientific facts we have for that, that is what we would ban under our model. And so with our model, with this piece of like legislation that we'd be proposing that governments would ban this in schools, we're still going to reflect personal freedoms within the homes, but heavily discourage parents from doing this because there are people who would disagree with our model, and that's fine in the home, but we're talking about the wider society, that we would ban these myths, and hopefully this would lead into the home so we could ultimately ban children from learning about myths in the home. So myths, we're so proud to support this resolution because myths are ultimately lies. Myths are something that's bad for society because lies aren't good in society. That's why you'll be hearing from all our other speakers today how myths are ultimately lies. And lies are falsehoods, and we should not believe in something that's false. Ladies and gentlemen, for these reasons, we're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you very much. You guys give him a huge round of applause. And now, negative team, you have 1 minute to prepare for your team's first speaker.
Broke myself. If there's a chance, I'll take it.
And now we welcome to center stage the first speaker from the negative team. Give him a round of applause. Please introduce yourself. Tell us your name, your school, your country.
Hello, my name is Mitja Sovac. I'm from Slovenia, from Gimnazija Celje Center. Myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, members of the opposing team, we are so proud to oppose this motion that children should grow up without myths. And let me start with my rebuttal. What is a myth? A myth is a story that is said about something, maybe a creation of something, or maybe about some fictional characters or something like that. But those characters existed. And why do myths exist? As we will tell you in our 4 speeches, to help children, which were not mentioned in their first speech, understand the world, to bring the world closer to the children, to make them comfortable with the world, because we have to keep them innocent, as you will hear in our last speech. Also, fiction is not myths, but where does fiction come from? Fiction cannot appear from out of the air, out of thin air. We have to get fiction from somewhere, and we get fiction from myth. Orpheus and Eurydice, and myths similar to that, or the creation of Rome, were motions to start some great fictional works, but they were myths at first. And those myths are told to children so they can learn history, so they understand history easier. And that is why we believe that, no, fiction is not the same as myths, but myths are the cause of fiction, and later a bit of explanation to fiction. And that is why we believe that myths should be told to children. Also, who are children? You didn't define who a child is. In our opinion, a child is someone who's aged up until age 18. Therefore, how could you keep myths from people older than, 10 years? They have Google, they have everything. They will look myths up. You cannot provide censorship for them. And then, about the myths of science of creation. We all mostly know, and the children will be taught, that the world wasn't made in 7 days by God. But explaining Higgs and bosons to a 4-year-old, or explaining him the laws of quantum physics, it's just not right. He won't understand it. That is why we tell him that the world was made in some other way, so he will understand the world, so he would feel comfortable, so he won't become depressed in the world. And now to my constructive part of the speech. We will give you 4 arguments in our 3 constructive speeches, starting with my argument, imagination, continuing with the second speaker, who will be presenting morals and culture, and finally, in our 3rd speech, we will present to you the argument of innocence. And to begin with imagination. How do myths give us imagination? There are some epic stories about heroes, people, about creations that can in no real world be true. But those myths provide imagination. And why is imagination important for children especially? If they see the world just from a scientific view, they will believe only that, and they won't know how to think outside the box. They will only think there is one type of world. They will only think that there is one thing in the world. But that's not true. In children, we have to develop a critical and their own way of thinking, and that is what imagination and myths gives us. Also, by reading myths, children gain vocabulary. And why do they do so? Because myths are usually interesting, fun, and they attract children. And that is why they want to read them. And therefore, they do read them. They listen to them. They gain vocabulary. They learn. And also, what do myths lead to later in life? People looking at the moon and not knowing what it was once a myth. And how the moon came to be was once a myth. But that myth ran people to think, maybe we could go up there. Maybe we could go to the moon. How do we do that? And this is why we believe that people like Albert Einstein, like Nikola Tesla, like Stephen Hawking, without myths, wouldn't do anything. Because they wouldn't have the imagination. They wouldn't dare to think outside the box. They wouldn't dare to say their ideas. They wouldn't dare to go to the extremes, to imagine 4 dimensions. They wouldn't. And this is why we believe that myths should be told to children, and we beg you to oppose. Thank you.
Great job, you guys. Make some noise for the first speaker from the negative team. And now, affirmative team, you have 1 minute before your second speaker.
Give me a second, I got this. Stay here beside me. We'll do the unlikely soon. Yeah, give me a second, I got this. Yeah.
All right, and now we welcome the second speaker from the affirmative team. Give him a round of applause. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
I am Rafe Harrison-Murray from Scotch College, Perth. We strongly believe that children should grow up without myths. And in my speech today, I will give one theme, which is the effects on the children. And in this theme, there will be 3 points of substantive that I will touch on. How it causes unreal expectations. 2, how it stereotypes and de-individualizes people. And 3, how it devalues childhood. But before I get into my substantive, I would like to discuss what the opposition has told you. So they told you that, well, it will help children understand the world. Well, no, we disagree. We think it causes a greater sense of confusion. The mind is not as fluent as they seem to think it is. Once someone has an idea in their head, it's very hard to break that train of thought. And not only that, but it also portrays a fake world. I mean, look at the idea of creationism. Teach it to kids so it helps them understand. No, because what's going to happen is later on when you go and try and teach them evolution, they're not going to believe you. And also, they've told us that, well, you can't provide censorship later on because of Google and stuff. Well, do you think it's healthy that these people find out that their parents have been lying to them about Father Christmas and stuff like that later on? Do you think it's healthy for the child to find out that their parents have been clearly lying to them? And they've told us this idea of, well, let's teach them creationism because it's easier than teaching them quantum physics. Well, I'm afraid it does hinder progress doing this. And they've also given forth this point of how, this main point that they gave forth, which was a lack of imagination. Well, we're not against them telling, well, this is a story. And we don't think you have to portray something as true to increase a child's imagination. And not to mention, we believe that there is true beauty in the world. And we think someone can have a perfectly fine imagination if they look at the world around them. Because there's truly some beautiful things out there. And also, they've told us about how... Anyway, so I'll give an example. Harry Potter. I read it reasonably early, but I realized it was fiction. Does that mean that I couldn't imagine other stuff about it because I knew it was fiction? No, even if you know it's untrue, it doesn't stop you having an imagination. It's not mutually exclusive. Fact and imagination are not mutually exclusive. So my points are substantive. So this point of unreal expectations, well, you can cause a whole heap of confusion by telling someone something that isn't true. Look at creationism. Look at the pain that has caused and how this has affected the world. It's been horrific for the scientific community. Also, it causes kids to distrust parents and other authority figures. The example here is Father Christmas, which is, it takes away, it's completely false. And the second you find out that Father Christmas is not real, spoiler alert, the second you find Father Christmas isn't real, well, what do you find out? You find that your parents have been complicit in lying to you. Do you honestly think this is fair? No, it's not, and it's completely immoral. And also, it takes away from the real meaning. The fact is, Father Christmas Christmas has become about giving presents. Where if it was said, well, we're going to give you presents, but the real meaning is about family, I'm afraid this delusion takes away from people. Anyway, so on my second point of substantive, stereotypes. Well, I'm afraid you group people together in this. Look at the myth of David and Goliath, okay? Well, while David may be an uplifting story of an underdog, what do you take if you're a 7-foot-tall person and you read the story of David and Goliath? Well, you see, well, he's tall, he's large, he's brutish. Does that not stereotype someone? When you've got a whole range of these myths always portraying a certain type of people in a certain type of way, it does stereotype them. And it causes a loss of individuality, which I think directly combats this idea of imagination. I mean, you find yourself, people should be looking for themselves in themselves, not looking at lies to see what they should be like. We believe that also, third and finally, it devalues a childhood. The term living a lie is around for a reason, because the second you find out that your childhood was a lie, that Father Christmas was not real, that the Easter Bunny was not real, that the Tooth Fairy was not real, do you think this reflects that you had a good and honest childhood, which was innocent, as child is often described? No, it was malignant and filled with lies. And for these reasons, we are very, very proud to affirm this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much and great job. And now, negative team, you have 1 minute to prepare for your team's second speaker.
So close, so close. I can feel it now. So close, so close.
And we are now ready for the second speaker from the negative team.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sanjeet Agarwal, and I'm going to be the second speaker for the negative team, and I'm going to strictly oppose the motion. So firstly, before I present my constructives, I'd like to debunk some of the very false statements that have been made by the opposition and which they've not interpreted correctly. Firstly, they talked about the importance of how a myth and fiction need to be differentiated so that children do not believe they're being taught something which is false. I do not think that is relevant to the motions, since myths might or might not be true, whereas fiction is absolutely and always not something which is not true. If you tell a child that this is something that might or might not be true, it's more likely to have an impact on his opinions rather than you telling him a story and telling him it's absolutely false. Then the opposition also talked about how children would believe that they've been taught lies and they would distrust their parents simply because they've been taught myths when they were young. They gave the example of the Tooth Fairy and the Santa Claus. I do not believe that is the case. I think that myths teach children critical thinking. They teach them about the harsh truths of life, and they tell them to think for themselves. Let me give you an example. If I, as a 6-year-old, have been taught that if I keep my tooth on the bedside, I'd get a coin for that when the Tooth Fairy comes. And I've also been taught about the Easter Bunny and about how Santa Claus comes in and gives me gifts. 5 years later, when I realized that Santa Claus does not really exist and it's a myth, I learned that I cannot trust everything that's been said to me. I understand that I need to think for myself, and there are harsh truths of life, and not everything is absolutely simple and honest as has been told to us. Secondly, moving on, the opposition also talked about how we're telling children lies, and if you tell them something, they're going to believe it forever. Let me tell you, children are innocent. What you tell them has an impact on them, and they understand and interpret what they can from it. They gave example of Sisyphus and talked about how it's a false thing and it's not something which needs to be taught to a child. What if I tell you, if you tell me as a 6-7-year-old the story of Sisyphus, and I believe in hope, and I believe in never giving up, and that is something which I learned from that, I do not understand how it's false, and I do not understand how teaching a myth to a child is complicit or distrusting, or is causing distrust among the people. Then I would like to elaborate about how myths actually teach us about moral lessons of life. Let me give you an example of honesty. If I give a 6 or 7-year-old lecture about honesty and the complexities of always being honest and not lying, I do not think he would understand. But if I tell him the story of George Washington and about how he told his father about cutting a cherry tree, it would have an impact on him. We can explain complex things and complex ideas to young children through stories, and that is the very purpose of a myth. A myth instills ideas among children and among different people who might not understand the ideas complexly through facts, but through supernatural or fictitious stories. Then, myths also will help in teaching children about their cultural identities. They instill nationalism in them and give them a sense of identity. If a 7 or an 8-year-old Chinese kid is taught about the long march of Mao Zedong, he might might instill a sense of nationalism in him. And even if the Long March might be false, it will not impact him, since it's not something that he's always going to believe. But the idea of the sacrifices that the forefather of his nation made will have an impact on him, and that is something which he will keep across with him throughout his life. And with that, I'd like to conclude by saying that a myth or a fictitious story have different impacts and have different purposes. A myth can do what facts and complex ideas cannot do, and that is why I believe that children should not only be taught myths, but should also get the idea of being creative and being imaginative, so that their childhood has a sense of joy, has a sense of understanding, and while they grow up, myths can help them to progress as human beings and face the realities of life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are at the halfway point. We have 2 speakers from each team left, and we will now give the affirmative team 1 minute to prepare for their team's 3rd speaker.
Close, so close. Will you be right here? Will you be right here? Will you be right here right now?
And now we introduce and welcome the 3rd speaker from the affirmative team.
Honorable panel, skilled debaters, and most esteemed scholars. I'm Claire Kuo, the 3rd speaker for the affirmative team upon the resolution that children should grow up without myths. I would like to begin my speech by countering some of the arguments brought up by opposition before summarizing and elaborating on our own. Let's begin with the rebuttals. They have said that imagination comes from myths. But then, let's think about this. When you tell a myth to a child, they're being told what to think. They're given a structure, they're given a story that tells them what to believe. Further, you can get imagination from elsewhere, from stories that are not myths. But instead, somehow we want to continue on with myths and risk awful consequences. Why? Why stick to this faulty path? The cons greatly outweigh the pros. Let's move on. They have also said that children can learn from myths. Again, this argument rests upon the assumption that these all need to come from myths, but that is not true. These can come from stories. Stories are just as interesting, just as intriguing to a child. They can be learned from as well. So this is a distinction that my 1st speaker and 2nd speaker has already made, but somehow that the negative team cannot seem to understand. Further, they have said that children can learn critical thinking and that children don't believe everything they've heard. Children, however, can't always make such a distinction between what is real and what is not. They're young, they're innocent, they're new to this world. Their minds are fresh and open to manipulation and lies that myths give. These children, they can learn from critical thinking elsewhere. There are better alternatives, such as puzzles, riddles, any sort of problem, but not myths. And they also mentioned George Washington as an example. But George Washington, this story, it's a story that teaches a moral. And isn't it ironic, just so ironic, that we're preaching honesty when we're being dishonest about the world around them? Let's think about that. So moving on to my own argument. The societal effects that myths have. Myths have a set pattern. We have the valiant knight that saves the damsel in distress. We have that evil stepmother that everyone knows about. What are these? Gender stereotypes. We subtly tell our children that girls, they need to be rescued. Guys, they need to be masculine. They need to be manly. Why are we reinforcing these stereotypes? Further, let's go back to one of our prompts in debate, the model minority myth. Isn't that a stereotype, a myth as well? And instead, we're perpetrating this myth to our children. This restricts them. This shoves them into a box that they may not necessarily fit in. It goes back to the development of the child, where we have to be careful about what shapes them. And myths are too dangerous to do that. Further, let's look at this. Special area. We are told constantly about the journey of a male hero. Odin, Zeus, David and Goliath, male heroes. Let that sink in for a bit. Where are the females? Okay, let's go on. Let's go on to science. Maybe you've learned about the Scopes trial, where religion and science clashed. This myth impairs science. It impairs the development of science. It impairs the truth that we need to tell our children. And further on, what about the idea that global warming is a hoax and that vaccines cause autism? These are ludicrous. These are conspiracies. And so this is why this resolution should stand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Negative team, you now have 1 minute to prepare for your team's third speaker.
I don't know if I'm going to heaven, or if all my sins.
And now, the third speaker from the negative team. Go ahead, please introduce yourself, tell us your name, where you're from.
Hi, I'm Lily, and I'm from the International Community School Amman. Imagine yourself as a child. How innocent you were. Imagine how comfortable you were. How happy you were. Hi, I'm Lily, and I firmly believe that children should grow up with myths. However, I'd just like to address some of the points that the previous speaker made. She talks about being honest. But let's be honest here, the adult world is not an honest place. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in the United Kingdom. Crime rates are going up in pretty much many of the major countries. If we teach our children to be honest constantly, how are they supposed to survive in such a cruel and harsh world? The opposition also seems to be missing the main point of the debate. The debate is about children. However, they seem to think that the things we're taught in childhood follow through until we're 40 years old. When I was 4 years old, I believed in the Tooth Fairy, in Santa Claus, in the Easter Bunny. However, now I am 14, nearly 15, and I'm fully aware that these things are not true. However, they shaped me as a human being. I'm Bulgarian, and in Bulgaria we are, majority, from the Orthodox Church. And so my childhood was full of tales of God and how God shaped the earth. However, I'm 14 and I don't believe in these things. It just shows that myths do not create fixed mindsets. Children are innocent. Think back to your own childhoods. How can we rob children of what is our childhood? Myths are an integral part of growing up. When I think back on my childhood, it's littered with myths, as I've said. They've helped shape me to be the person that I am today, and I'm proud of that. How can we strip our children of this when they build us as people? I wouldn't be the same person I am today if I'd been taught honesty from a young age about everything. When I was 4 years old, I didn't understand quantum physics. I don't understand it now. But when I was 4 years old, I certainly wouldn't have understood it. Recent studies have shown that parents believe that around 40% of children in America have lost their innocence at a young age. Another study shows that around 30% of adults regret decisions that they made when they were young. Now, this may be due to development of technology and cyberbullying and things that we have to deal with in the modern world. However, the negative team believe that this is due to a loss of innocence that myths help to preserve. Myths are stories, no matter what the positive team may have told you. They're stories that help children to grow up, to understand the world that we live in. We need to keep our children innocent because they are slipping dangerously into a spiral of growing up too quickly. We need to protect them. It is our job. And if you can't do that, then what can you do? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now have only the final speakers from each team. They will give their team's closing arguments, but remember, audience, After they have finished, we will be opening up the floor to you to share your own ideas. So think about anything you would like to maybe also contribute. You have an opportunity to share those things. And now we give the affirmative team 1 final minute to prepare for their team's final speaker.
And I lost my only chance at redemption. But the stars I see.
And now we welcome to the center of the stage the 4th and final speaker from the affirmative team.
Good afternoon, honorable adjudicators, respected opposition, fellow teammates, and audience. My name is Aisha Nabila from Indonesia, and we strongly believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that children should grow up without myths. To start off, I would like to rebut the arguments put forth by the negative team. The first speaker of the negative team stated that myths help bring the world closer to children, to make them feel safer. If anything, it makes the world feel distant, too big. It makes the world feel unfamiliar with all these unfamiliar concepts and beings that we are told through myths. The first speaker also said that myths help us understand history. Myths complicate ideas, and myths, if you want to learn about history, read about it, learn solid facts. For example, the Long March and the Alamo, things that we've studied in our curriculum. It is exaggerated, it is glamorized, it gives us a glamorized idea of what history was like. It gives us a false idea of the occurrences in our history. The first speaker also said that myths give children imagination. It limits imagination. Children are told what to think, how this earth came about through detailed stories of creations. Without these myths, children can ponder all they want, can wonder all they want, can imagine all they want about how this earth came about. The second speaker of the negative team stated that myths tell children to think for themselves. Again, myths itself tells them what to think. It gives us very detailed accounts of how history came about. The second speaker also said that it teaches children not to trust people. Is this really a positive thing to teach children? Why would we want to encourage trust issues in children? People should only learn this lesson through personal experiences. It is ironic to teach honesty through lies. And think about the Columber. A father tells his son about how a shark victimizes someone and follows them for the rest of their lives until it eats them. And the child grows up scared, running away from happiness, running away from joy. Is that what you want to do to the children of our futures? The third speaker of the negative team stated that the things we are taught in childhood do not follow through. I think I do not only speak for myself when I say that most of the things I know about manners and kindness and courtesy comes from the earliest memories of my childhood. I am proud to say that who I am today does not come from the irrelevant myths I was told as a child, but by experience and through exploring the world with my own 2 eyes. Now, to summarize my team's points, my first speakers spoke about the difference between fiction and myths. Hansel and Gretel, for example. These aren't myths, but fictional stories that fosters children's creativity, something that we agree about through the negative team's points. On the other hand, as an Indonesian, I grew up fearing gardens and the evil green giant that was told to me through the Indonesian myth of the golden cucumber. Is that what we should do to all children? My second speaker spoke about how myths causes many issues, one of them distrust among children and their parents later down the line. To add to this, myths causes stereotypes and makes people lose their individuality. My third speaker spoke about the suicidal effects that myths have on people. Not all myths sound beautiful. Think about all the little girls who are being told myths about men dominating the world. Is that not damaging to a girl's self-confidence, to my self-confidence, to all the girls in this room? Does it not damage your self-confidence to hear that men are the people that dominate this world? When we step back and look at the bigger picture, we give up our backs and allow myths to apply the rear naked choke to our minds. Is this really what we aim to impose on the children of our future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And scholars, everyone, can you make some noise for the entire affirmative team? And now we have only the final speaker from the negative team. We will give them 1 final minute to make any last-minute plans for their 4th speaker.
And I know they'll start aligning. Would you mind just this time stay here beside me? Beside me.
And now our last speaker of this debate showcase, the fourth and final speaker from the negative team.
Honorable adjudicator, worthy opposition, fellow teammates, and audience, I'm Ryan Byer, and I'm the summarizer speaker for the opposition with the motion that children should grow up without myths. I've identified some major clashes in this debate, and I'd like to explain why the opposition have better argued these points today. Firstly, on the question of, do myths tell us what to think? The Proposition 4 speaker has told us that myths tell us stories that we need to believe as children, but we see that this is totally false. Take creation stories. They have subtle differences in almost every culture. Take worldwide flood myths. Again, there are differences and variations in almost every culture, and thus we see that we are not all being fed the same stories and lies. We are being given different viewpoints and experiences from which we can grow. Also, the notion of a myth. Proposition 1 told us that there is always evidence that myths are false and untrue, but we see that this in itself is false. Is there evidence that George Washington never had a cherry tree? No. Is there evidence that an apple never fell on Isaac Newton's head? Again, no. Myths are not all lies. Myths are not all lies. They allow children to experience different viewpoints and ideas. Next, will myths be censored in the homes? Proposition 1 was under the illusion that myths won't be taught in schools, but personal freedoms, as he said, will be upheld and myths can be read in homes. But this is not the case because the motion today does not say taught in schools. It says grow up without myths. And thus, how can they justify giving myths in the home where children are living? Proposition also said personal freedoms, as if myths are personal freedoms, which we agree with, and it seems that we are all in agreement today that myths are integral for children to growing up. Also, the Father Christmas myth that one of the speakers talked about, Speaker 2 said that Santa isn't real, so your parents will lie to you, and thus we shouldn't have myths, we shouldn't have Santa Claus. But have they actually thought about what this would mean? This would mean that for all the children growing up, there would be no Christmas. There would be no Halloween. There would be no Easter. Is this right? Is this right? I don't think so, we don't think so, and I don't think you think so. Next, where does imagination come from? The Proposition 3 speaker said that it comes from stories that aren't myths, but we think that according to their definition, stories that aren't myths are in fact non-fiction. How do you gain imagination experiences? Almost imagination is not really true. It is in itself fiction. How are they saying that you gain that from cold hard facts? That is not the case. Next, where are all the females? Proposition 3 or 4 said that, and it is a valid point, but actually it isn't, because they are guilty of selective exposure, which we learned about this year. Selective exposure is when you only talk about things that actually help your case. Gaia, Chang'e, Papa, Pandora, Pyra, Fanny Blankers-Cohen, Martina Navratilova, Oprah Winfrey, Margaret Thatcher. Need I go on? They are trying to discredit myths as only for men because they cannot disprove that myths are crucial to growing up. So in conclusion, we look towards the future, but cannot forget the past. Myths are not grounded in the past only. They teach morals and cultural identity to children for the future. And for all these reasons, I urge you to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Scholars, everybody, can you make some noise? A huge round of applause to all the debate showcase speakers up here on the stage. This has truly been a global round level debate showcase. 8 very excellent speeches, but we are not done yet. Now we are going to ask our panelists, who have been taking many notes, listening very carefully up here in the front. We will ask them to step outside so that they can discuss, deliberate, and ultimately decide which of these teams has won this debate showcase. And while they are leaving, and while they are outside deliberating as a group, audience, remember, this is the opportunity we will give you to share your own ideas, to offer your own insight, perhaps offer a different perspective that no one up here shared. We will be running microphones around to various parts of the audience. There are actually microphone stands out in the audience. If you have something you would like to share, you can make your way, form a queue behind one of those microphone stands. Before we do begin this part, though, we would like to remind you just a few brief guidelines. So, once again, we remind you, with the size of this global round, with over 1,500 senior scholars, there is not enough time for everyone to share two things. There's not even enough time for everyone to share one thing. We also ask that you keep it short. We will actually have a timer up on the screen, counting down from 30 seconds. When your time is up, you are finished. We will move on to the next person. Try to keep whatever you're saying within that time, or else you won't be able to share everything. Focus on a single point. Also, remember, this is not a time to attack or try to rebut or say something directly at one of the debate showcase speakers up on the stage. They will not have an opportunity to respond. This is about new ideas. This is your opportunity to share something that you might have shared if you would have been involved in the debate showcase, something that has not been mentioned already. Adults who are at the back or perhaps up in the balcony, you are also welcome to share your own perspectives. You can make your way down to a microphone. And as all of the debate showcase participants up on the stage have already done, we ask you to be respectful towards everyone that is here, towards our host country. Basically, do what the debate showcase participants up here have already done, and we will all be doing well. All right, we will start over here. We will have a timer up. First, an announcement for the talent show.
Hi, there are just a couple of scholars that I need to see, that I need to check in with me over there. So if you hear your name, please come over there and check in with me. Trustin Jan Heng, Grace Chan, Laura Kaserman, Caitlin Faith Junio, Rosette Manala, and Lotus Bayon. If that is you, please come see me down there to check in for the Scholars Show. Thank you.
All right, so we'll start over here.
Okay.
We'll alternate back and forth. We also have some up there. Again, keep your eyes up on the screen. Before you say anything, quickly tell us your name, where you are from, and then share what it is that you would like to share.
Okay. Hello, my name is Daniel Diaz. I'm from the Philippines, and I would just like to say, as a person who's really interested in many different religions and in anthropology, I would like to say that it's really sad that the positive team was more of like, it's like they were against teaching tradition and the reception and translation of cultural artifacts. And it's interesting that they mentioned the Big Bang, but the one who proposed the Big Bang was a Roman Catholic priest.
Thank you for sticking within the 30-second timeline. All right, and now the gentleman over here.
Hello, I am Poom, and I'm from Thailand, and I would just like to touch on the Christmas point. You say Father Christmas makes trust issues for parents, but I think this is for a very good reason. You want your children to trust your parents all the time. This allows your children to become inquirers, or do you want them to be blind sheep? Thank you.
And now up towards the back right.
Yes, I'm Idris Mautaudaya of Indonesia's Global Jaya School. And I would like to point out that while the affirmative team would like us to think that perhaps teaching people myths is the same as forcing ideas upon them, but do they realize that teaching them scientific methods, scientific ideas without deliberating upon the scientific method at which those ideas are developed, isn't that the same thing as forcing ideas upon children? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Cheryl from Myanmar International School, Yangon. I want to talk about how young children, they are not really prepared for the horrible truths of this world. If you remember the weight of memories, the fetus, she, whatever, committed suicide because they couldn't handle the pain of all the horrible things that happen in the world. And I don't think kids could, come to terms that this is the world they live in. Thank you.
Zach from St. Andrews, Thailand. And don't myth give children role models that are perfect, that are better than what we are. It teaches children to be optimistic, to be idealists. And everybody here, I think, can call themselves idealistic, visionaries, dreamers. It gives children the motivation to be better, to become better than they already are, to strive for the impossible even if they can't do it, because that will make them better because of it. Thank you.
Does this work?
It does work.
Is Jackie Wu, and I'm from Thailand. I just want to talk to the proposition. The proposition has said that myths create the same mindset in everyone. However, I personally have heard about 3 different versions of the Changi myth and 2 different versions of Nuwa creating people. And each myth has different interpretations in different eyes. There are 100 Hamlets in 100 different eyes. How can we say that it creates the same mindset when there are hundreds of variations on the same myth and thousands of interpretations for each variation?
All right, thank you.
Can I talk? No? Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Nuri Benitez. I'm from the Philippines, and I just kind of wanted to talk about the definition of mythology because in my perspective, mythology isn't really just stories, whether are fictitious or not, but for me, oh my God, I can hear myself. For me, myths are things that are signifiers to other things, and that is the reason why we have myths. They represent other things, and it's not whether they're true or false, literally.
If we could get the mic down here at the bottom right of the stage.
Hello? Okay, hello, my name is Josh Cho and I come from Kaohsiung American School. I just want to say that as a child, my mother always told me about stories of Moon Festival like Chang'e, rabbits making medicine on the moon or a guy chopping trees on the moon, and not just Moon Festival, all these other holidays have myths behind them, and this helped me not only with my creation, but also with sharing my culture to other people and showing my pride in my country. So at the end of the day, I do believe that myths are important to our childhood.
Thank you very much.
My name is Mac from KS International School, Thailand, and today I would like to present the point that I don't believe that myths of Prince Charming and those guys aren't about females or damsels in distress. I believe that the Prince Charming is a role model for us guys to use our strength to protect the ones we love and the ones we care about. And that is how it should be interpreted in the first place. Thank you.
Well, he sounds like it.
Ladies, I think he may be available. And now up at the back there.
Hi, my name is Shaurya Chandravanshi. I'm from the UAE delegation. And I'd like to say that a point in the debate was that myths are used for behavioral modeling, but you don't have to lie to someone to tell them how to behave. So fables and other stories like that with morals that tell you to be honest or nice to people can totally just be classified as not myths. You don't have to tell someone, hey, there's a dude in the sky just throwing lightning bolts. You can just tell them the truth.
All right, thank you. And now up at the back on the other side.
Hi, I'm Hillary from Singapore. I like to say that myths can also be used to inspire students or inspire children to strive for more despite their obstacles, like rags to riches myth. myths like Richard Branson. This mic is weird. But yeah, Richard Branson, rags to riches. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin from China, and I totally agree with the positive side point that myths promote like gender inequality. But as a geek, I would also like to address that gender equality not only happens in myths, it happens in everywhere else, like comic books, like superheroes are always like male, straight, white, masculine, and like video games. Just look at Resident Evil 5, for example. I mean, so, and none of those people, none of the things that are being censored, so yeah, no feminists, no advocates.
All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lillian. I'm from Malaysia, and I just like to say that myths show the world, show children especially, that it is not all black and white, that people are not just a single thing. Things can be good and bad and somewhere in between. And it is only through myths that we learn that kings are not people who just rule their nations and always make the right decisions. Sometimes they need to make sacrifices, and children need to understand this, even from a young age. And that's what I believe myths are for. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Daniel, and I'm from Island School in Hong Kong. Now, first, I just want to say that was like a really good debate, so thank you for that. And one thing that I just want to say on the ops team, that myths have also been passed on from like generation to generation since ancient times, and that's how these stories have came about. So by not teaching any children these myths, and by removing myths from childhood, you're also removing kind of this national history and also human history, and not teaching children that. So thank you.
So I'm Talia from Thailand. So the definition of myth, which is something people believe in but isn't necessarily true, it would have been really cool to see the negative side, bring up the fact that money and society itself is a myth, because it doesn't really exist. If you think about it, it's something that we put value into, and that's why it has value. So it would have been really cool to see them bring up that point.
Hi, my name is Tan, and I'm from Vietnam, and I would like to utilize my time to address the third speaker perspective on how she grew up in an Orthodox church, but when she grew up, she doesn't have that fixed mindset. However, I would like to address that she is speaking from the perspective of a privileged and educated background, and she got to interact with people in the WSC and actually educated stuff. However, what about people who are actually not educated and don't have access to those debunking things, and they are only taught through oral traditions and myth? Do they still maintain that fixed mind state? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Safal Ariel from Thailand, and I was a bit surprised no one brought up that by taking different myths and comparing them, especially ancient ones, you can learn a lot about history and what it has to offer. For example, if you take the Great Flood myths, it's mentioned in the Bible, and also the centuries-older legend of Gilgamesh. By comparing these, we can actually draw that a flood may have happened some time ago of that magnitude. Thanks.
Very quickly, before we go to the next speaker, one other very quick talent show announcement.
Could I see Rose Lee, Ng Ji Han, and Jiwon Lee down there right now, please? Thank you.
All right, and we'll continue back up at the back right.
Being in the audience, I feel like some of the speakers just focus a little bit more than necessary on the crowd's reaction. Only if you guys can focus more on the content, the debate would somehow be better. But overall, you guys did a really good job. Thank you.
Audience, remember, we are not trying to give individual feedback. Rather, this is about focusing on new ideas, things that were not shared in the debate.
Hi, I'm Surbhi Agarwal from Chinmaya Vidyalaya, India. I really enjoyed the debate, but there was this point that was brought up about Harry Potter and other fictional stories but they all have this, most of them have this element of magic in it, which people wouldn't have thought about if there were no myths in the first place. And this is kind of how myths came about, like people telling stories which they didn't have proof about but seemed interesting anyway. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Myra. I am from Malaysia. I'd like to address points that I think hadn't been brought up in this debate, which I thought would have been interesting. The fact is that myths are often created by adults and for adults, and usually they include very family-unfriendly themes. I hope I don't have to elaborate on Gaia and Uranus' relationship with each other. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
A lot of people were talking about Santa Claus, and my dad once considered actually teaching me about Santa Claus. So when I learned the truth, I would learn to always question authority, because in the end, it's better to learn about that with Santa Claus instead of with, say, a president that promises to build a wall using Mexico's money.
I'm Lavishka from India, and one point I would like to bring into spotlight is about Robert Hass, the author of Praise. As a kid, he had a clear lack of traditional stories, and he felt that void until his teenage years, and then eventually it was poetry that he turned to fill that void. So that could be something maybe the teams could use. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony from American International School, Hong Kong. I was very surprised with this debate that no one mentioned the fact that children are very impressionable and myths can give them the wrong impression about the world and sometimes even death. For example, child suicide bombs or the Slenderman killings, where some teens killed children based on the Slenderman myth. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maram. I'm from Bahrain. I come from St. Christopher's School. I just wanted to mention the affirmative team spoke about how we're told how to think and that limits our imagination. But you don't have to think in the same way that you're told. Like, you don't have to believe what you're told all the time. And there's no proof that myths limit someone's imagination, nor is there any proof that myths don't limit someone's imagination. So either way, myths should and should not also.
All right, thank you very much. And it does look like our panel is ready. We will take 4 more audience input suggestions. We'll go one time around, and then we'll invite our panel up on the stage. So starting here, one more round.
Hello, my name is Monas Abdo from NAS Dubai. And I understand the important influence of myths on culture and how they are important. However, we do not have to believe in myths to actually understand what they are and take influence from them. And I believe that the first step to fixing any problems we have with society is to encourage critical thinking and develop that skill for kids by teaching them the truths about the world and teaching them how they can avoid problems. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Le Ying from Malaysia, and from what I've studied in the mythology section this year, there is such idea proposed by Carl Jung called the collective success, where the whole population believes in the same myth. So should we consider sharing these myths as a lie to children when everyone believes in it? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Janet, and I'm a teacher from Qatar, Al Jazeera Academy. I think personally that our cultural identities, our traditions, the history of language would be lost without myth. We will not have literature, we will not have theaters and music, and definitely Shakespeare will be lost without myth. Thank you.
I'm Luis from Ateneo. We say that not all stories are true, but all stories have truth to them. And in that case, the question becomes this. Which would we rather have? A world where we lie to kids in order to give them these values? Or one where we tell them the truth and maybe the values are missed out? Thank you.
All right, and we are now ready for our panelists. As our panelists come in, can you guys give them a round of applause? All right, in the interest of time, we were going to allow our panelists to share 3 30-minute speeches of feedback. So if we could have 3 of the panelists come out here into the front, 3 of the panelists who will be speaking on behalf of all of them. Each of them will have 30 seconds to give feedback to both teams about the debate, and then perhaps a couple others will very dramatically announce the winning team of the debate showcase.
I think both the teams did really well, and you guys were amazing. What really intrigued me were the rebuttals. They were constructed explicably, and they made everyone maintain their composure throughout, and I genuinely think that they did not fail to achieve what they were trying to put across. And yeah.
What I thought was something that was really well done for both teams was connecting with the audience. So for the affirmative team, they did talk about gender roles, and of course there's a lot of females in the room, and they definitely did connect with them like that. And also for the negative team, just the rebuttals were confronting, but also very intriguing. Also examples and evidence. So the negative team used so many examples. The use of lists definitely benefited their argument greatly, but I found that the affirmative team was very much opinionated, and the negative team definitely did harness the material that they were studying for this year. So, yeah.
So from my opinion, I think that the voice modulation and articulation made for a really strong argument. All the team members were quite persuasive in their arguments, and their confidence really won over the opinions of the audience. Use of rhetorical questions, specifically on the proposition, really persuaded the audience in their arguments, and the engagements and the passion with which the speaker spoke made me really proud to be part of scholars that are this powerful when it comes to debating.
Hi guys. So, as you might have noticed, obviously both teams are impeccable, but we have to pick only one winner. So the winner is 3, 2, 1, Team Negative. Congratulations, you guys.
And as per World Scholars Cup tradition, we do ask both debate showcase teams, affirmative and negative, please cross the stage and shake one another's hands in congratulations. And scholars, one more time, make some noise. Give a round of applause to all the debate showcase participants.
The stars, they are shining. They'll start